Hi, everyone. Thank you for hanging in for so long and for listening to English for so long. I have a hard enough time speaking English for a long time. I can't imagine how exhausting it is to be listening to English for a whole day. And the jet lag is just starting to kick in for me right now, so if my eyes cross, don't be startled. It's just the jet lag. So a few weeks ago, we were approached by, knowing that we'd be coming for the workshop, which is happening starting on Monday, Daniela and Jamshid asked us if we'd be interested in doing some presentations for the Masterclass as well, which of course we agreed to. It was a flattering opportunity to be able to share some thoughts and ideas with the group. And we provided a couple of ideas, and they immediately said, yes, great, we love them, go ahead with it. Then we looked at each other and said, oh, now we actually have to come up with the content to fill in on these topics. So even though my career has been in industrial design and strategy and customer experience, and I've used machines for the bulk of my career and used machines to design other machines in my career, taking a step back and thinking about a more emotional component to the work and an impact beyond just the usage of the products is actually quite challenging to do. So what I'm going to be sharing with you today is a combination of some thoughts and some questions and hopefully some answers. Feel free to interrupt me at any time during the talk if you have a question, or we can wait till the end. So just to start with a little bit about me, this is my name. It's a combination of my mother's culture, which is German, and my father's, which is French-Canadian. Any country that I've lived in, everyone has had a hard time with my name. And my first brush with artificial intelligence, since we've been talking about this quite a bit, back in the 90s was spell check. And this is what spell check decided my name should be, Stefane Barbeau. So that became a funny thing, and my friends would call me Stefane Barbeau, and so it's a nice little AI. As I mentioned, I'm an industrial designer. My partner is Dwayne Smith, so he's the other part of Smith Barbeau. Early in our careers after consulting, when we formed our company Vessel, as you heard from Dwayne's presentation, we developed and sold our own products, a combination of housewares and some simple consumer electronics. This is one of the lighting items. It was called Candeloo, as opposed to Candela, which was the other line. It was for kids, obviously, brightly colored rechargeable lights that kids can use at night and that parents can use with new babies. Because the division of labor in our company was such that I handled most of the communication, marketing, some design, and a lot of customer interface stuff, I became quite interested actually in the customer experience, the full customer experience, and became quite good at being able to lay out and identify every single touch point in the customer experience when a person gets a product, or even before that in e-commerce when they first see the product, go to make the purchase. When the product gets shipped to them, they unbox it, they use the product, possibly return the product if there's a defect with the product, lifespan of the product, recycling, and the cycle starts over from there. So since I was managing a lot of that with our own company, since then I've been consulting with other companies to help them understand the full extent, in particular for entrepreneurs who have a great idea for a product. Oh, that's an interesting transition. I didn't do that deliberately. Separately from that, some other work that I've done is purely conceptual. So at one point during the design work, which was very market-driven and very sales-driven, the decisions that we were making as designers were guided to a great degree by the potential sellability of the product. It, as you can imagine, became frustrating sometimes and a bit restrictive. So at one point, I, with several others, including Dwayne, started to develop concepts for products that were freed from market forces, so that had no need to be sold. It was purely for the sake of exploring the concept of the product. So one of mine here is called the infant mobility suit. And the idea here is that it's a suit for infants who are not walking yet, and it's rigged with electrodes inside that stimulate their muscles, and there are voice commands, microphone. The parent has voice commands. The microphone is here, sort of a nice nod to the umbilical cord still connecting the child to the parent. And as a result of the voice commands, the muscular stimulation kicks in the infant, and they can walk because of the technology in the suit. And so handy, right? If the parent is carrying groceries, they can just put the kid down, and the kid follows them into the house. So that was the concept there. This is done at the time. Well, there's always political stuff going on in the U.S., but this is in response to some voting problems that had happened in one of the federal elections, with a poor infrastructure to keep track of the ballots, as well as poor voter turnout. So I figured, let's combine the two problems and solve them with one product. Free French fries for everybody who shows up to vote in the elections, right? A nice incentive for them to vote. And also, organizations like McDonald's actually have surprisingly tight infrastructures and repeatability. So relying on a McDonald's outlet for the voting center for people to go to. So they get their free fries, they decide who they want to be their president, and then they put their ballot in the ballot box, which would be right next to the garbage can, where they can throw out the rest of the rest of it. Again, these are just conceptual ideas. They're not intended for actual marketing. As Jamshid said, I'm also a yoga instructor, and I've been practicing for quite a while. I had the opportunity to study yoga for pretty much 2 years solid while we were living in Asia. And that was a big turning point for me career-wise. Excuse me. Because it, to my surprise, was actually a physical manifestation of the design process upon reflection. The idea being that you experiment with a particular posture, you fail at it, you repeat that, you get better and better at it, you make discoveries until finally you master a particular posture, and then it's time to move on to the next stage. This particular arm balance does take a good amount of strength and flexibility to accomplish it, but once your brain has rewired itself to figure it out, it actually becomes quite easy after that, and you can use that as a stepping stone to get into other postures. And I like the parallel that this represents between the physicality of the practice, completely disconnected from machines, to my design career, which is completely based on machines. And I stick this in every presentation that I do. This is a drawing of me that my 50-year-old brother did, and I just I really like it, and this is not it's not terribly relevant here, but in terms of creativity, and he doesn't think that he has any talent. He can bang out these portraits like they're nothing, and if you want to send him a photograph of yourself, he'd, I'm sure, be happy to do a portrait for you. So, back to this. Can we find meaning in a world designed by machines? When I first started working on the content for this, I realized that I needed to make a actually, I'll get to that in a second. Before we talk about this larger question, let's ask ourselves, what is a machine? And if anyone was paying attention to, well, presumably you were paying attention to Dwayne's presentation earlier, it was the same question. So does anybody know what a machine is? Anybody want to? No. Right. I won't put you on the spot. So a machine is an apparatus that automates or enhances human actions, right? Nice, clean, simple definition. So automation and enhancement, it's about efficiency, consistency, repeatability, enhancement, power, speed, accuracy, reach. So that can be anything from a level that you use to level a surface, to a power saw, to a computer, to a robot, to AI, to an algorithm, full spectrum, to me anyway, at least from a design standpoint. So we already live in a world designed by machines. That is the reality. We live in a world designed by machines. I'm going to alter that a little bit and suggest this. We live in a world designed with machines. And as of yet, there's no evidence of machines having the sentience to actually have a creative spark and to be able to come up with things themselves. The machines are still tools. there's always an operator, whether it's an algorithm that someone has created or that is inputting data that is being processed by an algorithm, or whether it's something as simple as a power saw. There's an operator that is responsible, or the CEO of a company, in theory, is the operator of a machine if their company is considered a machine, especially in the AI industry. I'm going to change this once more. We already live in a world designed for machines. That's an extension of this idea. Where, given the idea that machines are so predominantly part of our existence, it raises the question about whether our environments are actually designed to support the machines increasingly more than they're designed to actually support the human beings that exist in the environments. Here's physical manifestation of that. This arguably is today's factory, right? Of course, there are still factories where things are produced, but in terms of human resources, this is the factory of today and moving forward, which is a big desk with computers on it. There are operators of these computers, and they are processing data and creating things. In fact, arguably, a lot of our time is spent either using machines to design or, how did I say it here? Using machines to design or using machines that were designed. Cities, computationally establishing, based on weather patterns, geography, spread out over time, what an ideal layout for a city is or could be. For better or for worse, doesn't necessarily control who your neighbor is going to be and whether you're going to have a good neighbor or not. But from a physical standpoint, machines are strongly involved here. This is a new interior that's been rolled out in the past year or two by Starbucks called Starbucks Reserve. And machines conceivably have the capacity, again, computationally, statistically, cost analysis-wise, to come up with the ideal interior. There's still an operator involved, still a designer involved, but with a limited palette of materials and colors and fixtures to create something that maybe is a nod to local culture, but mostly that will optimize sales in that particular geographic location. Algorithm-based, Starbucks is not going to open a new location somewhere on a whim or with making a big risk without knowing if it's a shot in the dark. When a Starbucks location opens, it's because they know ahead of time that particular branch will be a big success. This could be anywhere. And I researched this particular image, and it's not. I think this was opened somewhere possibly in the Middle East. So who knows where these things can be. Can anyone say where the machine is in this image? Yeah, it's a TV, yeah, right here. So machines increasingly invisibly integrated into our surroundings, which from a design and architectural standpoint is actually kind of exciting and interesting. But on the flip side, someone could be looking at that in a much more sinister way, given how easy it is to conceal technology as well. This is the cultural center, I think, in the Middle East, also a Zaha Hadid building. Hard to say, an architect. Her name is hard to say, Zaha Hadid. The question here is how much is the tool driving the design versus the designer driving the tool, a point that Dwayne brought up in his presentation as well. Is this suitable for humans? It's definitely an iconic shape, and it's definitely been designed by machines. This is not something that it maybe was conceived by hand and obviously by a human, but the tool of the machine was definitely in full force in the creation of this. And even possibly from a religion standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, creating an auspicious space or auspicious experience for people, if you will, by using CAD software and three-dimensional software with geolocation to track sunlight, make sure that the building is placed correctly with respect to the angle of the sun, and also conceivably making sure that the trajectory of the sun at particular times of year casts the right light through the side of the building to create the form of the cross. This is a Teo Ando building, quite beautiful. Our shopping experience is designed by machines. And I don't just mean that it's a digital site, but the curation of the objects are based on algorithms that are a combination of our spending patterns and what the companies want to push on us and sell to us. We have additional freedom because we have access to so much more online this way, but then the big question is kind of like our Facebook feed is being fed to us, and how limited are we as a result of the curation of these things by algorithms, by machines. Travel also has been, this is Airbnb, has been turned into a template. So it's making the world seem friendly and accessible, and giving us, exposing us to options for travel in places that maybe we would not ordinarily have gone, but is it limiting a sense of adventure and discovery in that way as well? Immersive gaming, where we can take on an avatar, take on a personality, be immersed and see a virtual world literally through a lens, but also psychologically through a lens, and start to exist in this world perhaps more than in the world that we are, than in the real world. Something that's a little bit more my speed, which I think is great. If you've heard of Monument Valley, this really great, no time constraints, you're not killing anybody. You can take as long or as fast as you want, and you just have this little character that's traveling through various worlds, and it's sort of a puzzle to sort of spin things and move things around and figure out how to get around in the world. It's a great distraction and stress reliever. So, talking about seeing the world through a lens that's created by machines that has an operator. Facebook's a great example of creating a world and seeing the world through a particular lens. So in effect, a world that is designed by or with a machine. It's a virtual world, despite the fact that our friends and family are posting real photos. That itself is edited, and the algorithms are editing the feed, and therefore our perception of our world through this lens. And the epitome, finally, of a machine-designed object. Here, the conception, the execution, the manufacturing is only possible because of high-level manufacturing techniques right now. And this is seductive. It's a beautiful thing. And it's no wonder so many people have them and covet them, just even as an object, not just in terms of the interface and the access to information and communication that we have through them. So all of these slides leading up to this one, my observation from looking at all of those things is that we work hard to remove evidence of human touch from what we're doing. And I don't mean we work hard to remove human interaction from it. I mean in the production and design, the design and production of these objects and environments, it's increasingly clear that it was designed strongly using the machine as a tool. And taking this a step further, are we aspiring to live in a world built by gods and aliens? And using the iPhone or the Zaha Hadid building, for example, these iconic, covetable, seductive things don't seem like they were made by humans, and we're working hard to remove the I don't even want to say the flawed reality of humans from it, but maybe some of the randomness and some of the texture and richness from these things. And starting to look at it this way, this is where the presentation starts to get a little bit sinister. Starting to looking at it this way, it's a little bit disconcerting that we are so willingly embracing all of these things that increasingly the human side to the objects that we're interacting with and the environments that we're working in and playing in and socializing in look like they were produced by aliens. So what is meaning? Does anyone have an idea of what meaning is? Anybody want to offer a suggestion? No, I'll make a suggestion. Meaning is a positive, symbolic, personal connection to the world. Makes sense, right? Meaning is positive, and it's symbolic because it's sort of an abstract concept, and it's a very personal thing. Why do we need meaning? To help us understand our role in the world and to thereby feel valued. We need meaning to understand our role in the world, and when we understand our role in the world, we feel valued. If we don't feel valued, our mental and physical well-being suffers, and we know that, and there's research that goes into that. Loneliness, emptiness, isolation, a lack of understanding of where we sit in our hierarchy with the rest of our world, with our social circles, very quickly results, and prison, great example, very quickly results in alienation, depression, anxiety, psychologically, and then that starts to manifest itself, and there's research that supports this as well, it starts to manifest itself physically as well in us, so we get sick. So how do we find meaning? Through positive experiences, through interactions, and through being able to take the time to reflect on those interactions and experiences. And that can be through our jobs, it can be interactions with friends and family. So the big question then is, can products, services, and environments evoke meaning? So we've talked about the use of machines in creating our world, and the fact that increasingly the sense of humanity is slipping away from the environments that we operate in. So is it still possible to salvage that and to ask if the things that we interact with can conjure that sense of meaning or lead us to find meaning? This is Charles and Ray Eames. They were based in California. They were a couple sort of known as pioneers of the grandparents of some of the modernist movement back in the 50s in California. And they were involved in the beginning of the Case Study House program, this idea of taking architecture and looking at manufacturing techniques and prefabrication, as well as the scale of houses to bring a sense of humanity back into some of the architecture, steer it away from where it was going at the time. I'm showing this slide. This is them in their house just outside of Los Angeles, and they're surrounded by objects that they've either found in their travels and brought into their house because the objects bore a particular meaning for them, or it's objects that they've designed themselves. And when I say pioneers, they were really pioneers in terms of meshing craft and technology. So the Eames lounge chair, just in the bottom right corner there, you may recognize, right? And they used at the time innovative techniques to bend wood and bond wood together so that it lent itself more efficiently to mass production processes. And we compare that to this, which is a contemporary interior. I found this image by Googling bland interior, and this is one of the images that came up. And so it's interesting that the algorithm successfully led me to this. Who knows how that image was tagged, or actually I'd love to know actually how that happened, that this interior came up. When you compare it to this, this doesn't necessarily suit my taste necessarily, but I appreciate the spirit that's in this setting. This has just as much stuff in it, maybe a little bit less. In a sense, it's more minimal, which I like, but it's wrong. And this feels like an interior that could be in a model home across the country, anywhere in the world. The sofas could have been purchased online based on algorithms that dictated, well, to get the highest sales and the most mass appeal, it needs to be this, within a fairly limited palette of color, fairly limited set of shapes. And then all the furnishings, also, it's a mishmash of odd cultural references that have nothing to do with each other. There's no rhyme or reason to this interior, and it leaves you with, it leaves me anyway, with a sort of an unsettled feeling looking at this room. Maybe a murderer would come walking down the stairs and kill the family that's in that room. Amazon in the US purchased about a year or 2 years ago Whole Foods, and it's a large grocery chain in the US, and they recently had 1 or 2 locations, I think this is in Seattle, of grocery store where you identify, grab all the products that you want, and you walk out without checkout because of RFIDs, presumably, that are implanted in all of the products. So in terms of efficiency and novelty, it's exciting, and it's an interesting use of machines and algorithms and technology to, in theory, make our lives more efficient. But the human touch, again, is taken out of the equation. And again, we're in a space here that conceivably was not designed by humans, has no evidence of humans, no cashiers. It allows people to stay in their bubble of zero interaction as well. So spend all your time on the phone, go into the grocery store, grab your stuff, keep your head down, not talk to anybody. Conceivably here in this concept, that's portrayed as an advantage, and that's a startling direction for us to be taking. Does anybody know what this girl is doing? Yes, she's watching TV. There was a photographer that did a photo series of a bunch of kids watching TV I think about 10 years ago, and I love this image. And I see myself that way sometimes, probably, if I'm really engaged in a TV show. The question is, what kind of experience is she having, or is she having any experience at all? Is there room for reflection for this child? And it's particularly distressing because it's a child that has this facial expression. I think we'd be more okay with this image if it was a adult with sitting there like that. But the fact that it's the child makes it all the more impactful. Hence, the photographer who did this photo shoot. So to get really sinister, what happens with no meaning? Isolation, perversion, and enslavement, a distortion of reality. We don't have any real life experiences to fall back on. We have nothing to compare, no benchmark to compare our ongoing experiences with when we're interacting with machines. And the risk is that is emptiness, and we wind up with possible enslavement and addiction to machines. So what's our savior? Here's an idea, good design. And what's good design? Dwayne said that already. Anybody? Good design, come on, 10 points of good design. No, won't make you do that. Good design, buildable, affordable, valuable, durable, usable, blah, 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 Dieter Rams. I'm gonna add one more thing to that, meaningful, right? Let's add meaningful to these days, given the issues that we're running into with technology, which were not the case at the time that Dieter Rams came up with those pillars of good design. Let's add meaningful to that as one of the goals that we have to follow with the work that we're doing. And good design is a plan, that's empathetic to the human experience. So can a machine help us with good design? We know that it can be used to design things, but can it be used specifically for good design? The answer is, it doesn't matter. It all relies on the operator. We can design things in a way that is empathetic to human experience, that's empathetic to human beings. So when we're looking at pre-existing things, or we're working on projects, follow the intent. Here's my very sinister idea of what a business is. Greed, power, and altruism, and it's a combination of those three things. and it all depends on how big a combination, where the weight lies. Does it lie in the altruism? Does it lie in the greed? Does it lie in the power? I'm not suggesting that greed and power should not be part of a business. That is businesses need to be profitable, they need to be competitive. That's looking at it in a more diplomatic way, right? Profitability and competitiveness. But for the sake of this, for the sake of the boldness of this, let's look at it that way. So I believe all we need to do is not reject greed and power, but to just make sure that the projects that we're working on, that altruism, the idea of helping people in the projects that we're working on, are just a tiny bit bigger than the other two. Just that they just trump the other two just by a little bit. And I believe that will make the venture sustainable, and it'll make the product sustainable. It's good for humanity, and it will make the company sustainable as well. So some examples here. Quick thoughts of those three things: greed, power, and altruism. What's this? Yeah, I mean it's using machine and design to just ram as many people into this. I think there's some power as well here. These are iconic. Well, yeah, no, they're iconic. They're certainly a statement of strength and money. But boy, the humanity has not been considered very strongly in this. How about this? I would say altruism. This is a master violinist, and he's using a product that's been around for years. There's a certain amount of sacredness associated with this product. I've seen some articles on how machines are used to possibly create an even higher quality violin than those that are made by hand, and I think that's a great thing, because the basis for it, the basis for using the machine, the basis for the venture, again, greed and power, there's a little bit of it. The company needs to make money, but the basis for it is to help people, to provide them with beautiful music, and to show the sacredness in this commitment to mastering an art and an art form. helping people, again, altruism, right? Again, this is a playground for kids. Great way for them to learn about themselves, learn about interacting with each other, interacting with their environments, falling, hurting themselves, learning agility. All that stuff is fundamental to kids being brought up. I'd much prefer to see a kid fall off of one of these things than to see the photo of them watching TV. Machines were used in the production of this stuff, but the end result was not to mesmerize the kids and have them addicted to life, to this playground, addicted for life to this playground, but it takes a second seat to the idea of helping people and educating them. This is interesting. So robotics replacing people in factories, right? That's a good thing, because it frees people up in theory for other pursuits. And there have been discussions earlier, I think last night, about this idea of, it was Axel, giving people the opportunity to do other things. And there will always be more jobs. And so the mourning of job loss can be short-lived, because they will move on to other jobs, possibly requiring more expertise and therefore more fulfillment. This is a money-making venture, and it's really on the fence about whether this is biased towards altruism or if it's greed and power that's the basis for it. Singapore, computers used to combine calculations of weather patterns and air quality, air pollution, beautiful combination of nature and architecture, in theory, to improve living conditions, possibly in tight constraints. I would prefer to live in this building than in the set of buildings that, if I had to live in an apartment building, I'd prefer to live in this building than in the set of buildings in the first slides. The intent here obviously is to help people, and a nice side effect is it's competitive, so it helps the company as well. Facebook. So I chose this slide because it shows the mission statement, at least the external, the customer-facing mission statement for Facebook. It helps you connect and share with the people in your life. Technically, yes, but show of hands, who feels neutral? Who feels shitty? Yeah, so something's wrong there, right? Just that, just that answer, there's something wrong going on, and it's because, in really, really simple terms, and I offer this up to you, is because the intent, when we look at the intent of the venture, in those three things, helping people, despite the mission statement here, we know increasingly in this particular case, the intent is not necessarily to help people. It's to get clicks, it's to gather data, it's to make money. And we have to be very careful with those things, not only on the venture side, but in our usage of those things as well. Good design uses machines for positive experiences, right? Some machines limit or pervert our experiences because they limit or pervert our experiences. A poor experience prevents us from finding meaning. Without meaning, we suffer. That's the summary of the presentation. Just one more thought here. Let's try to remind ourselves of the amazing things that have been done without modern machines, and make sure that when we do new things with machines, they're just as good, if not better. Thank you.